Hello, everyone. I trust you're well. I'm very excited that we'll be bringing someone on very special in just a second. So, we're going to go live because I'm a silly person. Okay. So, I trust everybody's well. There we go. All right. We are streaming live on Facebook because, why not, right? I've said this before. This usually comes to bite me in the tuchus. We'll see what happens. So, I am so thankful to be here today. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous day in the mountains of Western North Carolina from wherever you're joining us from. And I have the unique pleasure and privilege of introducing someone that I have met this year. And I don't know why we haven't met beforehand. Shame on me, right? Kimi will be coming on here in just a second. I'm positive, And we're going to have a discussion about home inspections. Specifically, there are questions that I have as a real estate professional. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Mary Sitton. I'm a licensed real estate professional in the state of North Carolina. This is my 20th year. I've been on over 500 home inspections and repair negotiations and all that great stuff. And I'll tell you, it's rare that you get a chance to speak with another professional and go over, hey there, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you. We are recording this Facebook Live, and this will be recorded so that way we can laugh, at some of the comments I make, I'm sure.
Love it.
So, hey, I was just explaining, I think it's so fabulous that I get to speak with you specifically because I know that you're a wife, you're a mom, you're a business owner, but I think you have a lot of hands in a lot of things, which, first of all, I applaud you. I think my second child sucked every brain cell out of my body. And so I'm lucky to know what day of the week it is. So let me first say hello there. And would you kindly just quickly give a little spiel about how amazing you are to everybody? Because I think you're amazing.
Oh, I could try. So my second child also continuously sucks the life out of me. She's sitting right here. So if she chimes in, just FYI. So yes, Kimi McBurney. I now reside in Western North Carolina. Like you said, I'm a wife. I'm a mom of two. I also have two dogs. And we have a home inspection business. I also have general contracting business. And I do hold my real estate license just for kicks, but
That's right.
referrals only.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love that. Thank you. The reason why I wanted to bring you on specifically was regarding home inspections. And I think we have a unique opportunity. I'm not sure whether or not this is recorded somewhere where somebody's already asked you these questions, but I thought, what a great opportunity for me to be able to speak with you. Because, I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, where maybe a buyer client, not mine, but maybe a buyer client or a homeowner once upon a time hired a home inspector. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general, generally speaking, they hired a home inspector. And on occasion, I hear they were dissatisfied, that there were things that were not found in the home inspection. Have you ever heard anything like that ever?
That's crazy. Things that were not found. Any homeowner inspector is going to tell you every single home inspector is going to give a different report for the same property. Everybody is different. We all do follow a standard of practice, but there is a level of kind of discretion that we use of things we include, things we don't include, how we phrase things, how we combine things, consolidate things. So yeah, it's fairly typical. That's why I think it's really important that you know and trust your home inspector, right? And making sure you have the same communication style, the same preferences, stuff like that. But yes, unfortunately, sometimes things are missed or things are just perceived differently. Definitely.
Right. Well, I literally heard somebody say that because the real estate professional recommended the home inspector, that they were in cahoots with each other to not disclose. And I just want you to know that we have a code of ethics as realtors and professionals. Our fiduciary duty is to our clients that we serve. And I think there is a misunderstanding, by the way, of who do you actually represent. So I would love to know who owns the home inspection? That's a question we get a lot.
So I'm going to say one thing to preface that kind of on what you said. I've heard that too, like, oh, this is shady. My realtor recommended you. First of all, you always have the right to go anywhere else and choose another vendor. But I promise you, neither Mary's license nor mine is worth jeopardizing any transaction. So please, yeah, please know that I've heard rumors, but I honestly can never say that I had firsthand experience with anybody changing their answer because of who they work with. That being said, who owns the report? Yeah, we get this a lot. So the answer is who paid for it. So whoever that is, right? So if the real estate agent pays for it, it's real estate agents. If a buyer pays for it, it is the buyers. Here's where it gets gray. As soon as you share that report, you are technically kind of relinquishing a little bit of that privacy right. I would hope that the person you shared it with would honor that privacy and honor that ownership, but they don't always do, and they don't always have to. So whomever paid for it owns it. And for example, if someone calls us down the road and says, oh, hey, I, inherited this inspection report. Okay, great. Unfortunately, I cannot speak to that without their permission. And the report is only good for the day that it was performed. So if you are 3 months down the road and it fell out of contract, well, we're going to recommend you get another one anyways, because you never know what transpired.
I'm so grateful that you said that because you're absolutely right. It is for that moment in time, folks. And so, if for some reason it is 30 days, 10 days, 15 days, things happen. One day, that's right. 24 hours later, the garage door spring breaks, and nobody could have predicted that that would have happened. So, I love that. Here's a fun question for you. Should the seller be present during the home inspection?
So I have an answer that kind of addresses all attendance, right? So first of all, attendance is optional. Let's talk about the seller, like you mentioned. We cannot legally tell them they cannot be there. It is their home. They have a right to be there. However, I always tell listing agents or advise them to advise their client to vacate because per our standards of practice, we can list that as a limitation. We could not fully do our job because this person was distracting, this person was in the way, or hey, maybe they just went and sat in the backyard and didn't bother you. But at the end of the day, as an agent, I want you to advise your client. We want to give them no reason to say that we interfered with their ability to inspect the property. So can the seller be present? Yes. Do we advise against it? Also, yes. Also try and take your pets away. Try and take away any distraction. The buyer could have a reason to come against you and say you make it available. So same with the buyers. So if the buyers attend, first of all, attendance is optional, but it is encouraged. We always say we ask that you arrive 2 hours after the start time. Your inspector needs uninterrupted time, even if you're like, but I'm just going to go over there and measure stuff. That's probably okay. But at the same time, you want to make sure they have every reason to have, 100% attention for you as the client. So, that's kind of our spiel on attendance.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. I've been on both sides of the spectrum, whether I'm the buyer or whether I'm the listing agent. It's strongly encouraged that listing agents don't necessarily attend the home inspection because you are somewhat you're just holding down air and space that needs to be used by the inspector. Maybe if you show up as a courtesy to say, I'm here in case you can't have access to something, that's possible. I loved I think it was your video using bolt cutters, that you had permission to use bolt cutters to cut off locks, because a lot of times people don't realize you need access to anything and everything to do your full inspection. So for those of you, whether you're going to do and talk about pre-home inspections or whether you're under contract and you're doing a home inspection, you definitely need access to all those areas by providing those keys. And I know I'm skipping around, but my brain, like I have borderline ADHD. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I have your attention. I can't wait to talk about this. So I encourage pre-home inspections, which allows the seller to address items before we go under contract or that could potentially deter a buyer from wanting to move forward, right? But then I always get the objection from sellers, well, if it's a buyer beware state and it's an as is, then the buyer's going to pay for it. Why should I go to the expense? Can you give like a really good example of where you did a pre-inspection and the seller was like, holy cow, I'm so glad I did that? Or do you have an example yourself, being that you're a licensed realtor as well?
Yeah, I have so many things to say, but my favorite statistic to share, 37% of contracts, according to the National Association of Realtors, fall through because of repair negotiations. So ask your seller, do you want a 37% chance that the initial contract terminates, or do we want to better our chances and get some of these issues out in the forefront? So that's really my strongest point I make, that kind of puts it in perspective. I personally, so I, as a realtor, we are obligated to disclose. I personally, as a realtor inspector GC, get a pre-listing inspection because I just want to make sure, and I get it from an independent company to make sure that my stuff is properly disclosed. But I get where sellers are coming from, and these are the questions I ask. Do they have money to make repairs? Because you don't necessarily want to uncover all of these somewhat minor items if they don't have the means to address them, right? Because then you're right, then we should just put that to the buyer if the buyer should choose to buy that in the condition that it's in. But if you do have the means to address some things, you may want to become aware of it. And just because you are aware, as a list agent, you have to disclose some major items. But again, you'd want to address those anyway so the contract doesn't fall through. And then beyond that, you can just keep that for your own information. You can market it as pre-listed or pre-inspected. And in our current market, it's multiple offer. It's getting crazy out there. So I tell people, if you want the strongest multiple offers, you put that report out there, because then there's really no need for due diligence, but they can often maybe eliminate due diligence or shorten due diligence significantly. So if you want the strongest multiple offer situation, you may want to consider a pre-listing.
So I love that. Kimi is absolutely right. For you consumers that are out there, I'm talking sellers specifically, you want to be the best looking product at the best price so that you can get the best terms with the least amount of inconvenience in the shortest amount of time. And the way to do that is to do a pre-inspection and possibly address those items, hopefully with a licensed contractor, unless it's something that doesn't require licensing. I mean, how many times have you found Mr. Seller, Mr. Fix It do something and you're like, was he drinking that day? What was going on there? Yeah.
Fair. Well, one other thing I'll add to that. So I often encourage sellers, if you do pre-list and you do plan to make repairs, make the repairs, have us revisit, re-inspect, and we'll give you a clean report. That way it's not messy and you don't have all these things on there. If it's no longer a defect and if it was addressed properly, we'll make sure we let you know, because sometimes sellers will do it and then they'll just provide some receipts and say we had it done, and that gets messy. So let's have it re-inspected by a professional, certified as, hey, this is now in working order, so you can give that confidence to potential buyers.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Here's my next question. And that is, my concern is what I'm seeing a trend, I'm sure you do as well, is like for those sellers who are just like, I don't care. It's the buyer's responsibility. I'm not footing the bill. And then the buyer agent gets their home inspection report and it's got 50 to 100 things on it. And then they're bringing out their own contractor or professional, and they are literally coming up with, this is going to cost how much? This is going to cost how much? And they're renegotiating the purchase price. I mean, there used to be a trend where it would be like, okay, Mr. Seller, we found XYZ. Now it's your responsibility to fix it, even though our contracts say you're buying the property as is, whereas the seller is not obligated to make any repairs. But at the same time, the buyer's not obligated to continue with the transaction. They can terminate for any reason or no reason, thus the 37% we were just talking about. So my curiosity is, even though somebody else does a home inspection, do you ever get called to come out and give your professional opinion as far as cost? Is there a conflict of interest when you do that, or is it only when you're the inspector and they ask you for, what would this cost? I'm curious.
Yeah, great question. And I wish more people knew the answer, so I'm so excited to share. So legally, per license law, home inspectors cannot solicit for repairs. So, my daughter's here.
It's all right. How old's your daughter?
This is the second one. This is the 3-year-old.
That is awesome. She is welcome to be on camera.
She may come over here. Legally, we cannot solicit for repairs. technically that means we could probably get answers on price, but anything that can be construed as us soliciting for repairs or like advising on repairs or recommending contractors is not allowed per license law. So I don't know any home inspectors that will kind of opine on cost of repairs, where to get repairs, stuff like that.
No, I love that. And here's another one to piggyback off of that. Let's say you're the home inspector and something is revealed. Like my favorite is if there's a crack greater than 1/8 of an inch that you recommend visually, your job is just to visualize. But it specifically states 9 times out of 10 in a home inspection report that you are to contact or seek the counsel of a licensed general contractor or a structural engineer. And you and I both know a structural engineer, just to step foot on the property, is going to cost probably in the neighborhood of $700 plus, where high, okay, thank you very much. Or a general contractor can come out and give their professional opinion. It may not be as costly. Is that accurate? Do you feel the same way?
Do. And I think this is something we pride ourselves on and something any agent interviewing a home inspector should pay special attention to. We don't have to, I'm going to phrase this, like we don't have to call it a certain trade. We always try and go with the lowest level possible. So a lot of our items say DIY fix. Hey, you can change your own filters. You can change your own smoke alarm. You can change your own light bulbs. Next, we're going to go handyman. Hey, a generic handyman, unlicensed professional can probably handle this. Then we're going to go general contractor. Like structural engineer in our vocabulary is like a bad word. Not really, but you know what I mean? Like we use it so sparingly. So you want to make sure you work with an inspector who's really going to gauge those things. Like a lot of builders like us, because we don't call for a contractor for everything. So know if we call structural engineer, it's probably more severe. You know, we don't always have to call it for a 1/4 of an inch horizontal crack, but it's really going to be our professional opinion of the entire assembly. You know, right? Is this a big problem? Because exactly, like to my minimum, I think for structural engineers 800. But I also know in our market, structural engineers pretty hard to find in a timely manner. So we try and use that very sparingly.
Yeah.
But yes, we are always going to kind of recommend the next step for you to explore your issues.
I love it. No, I love, love, love. And I think on to that, my brain is going to the fact that when the buyer gets the home inspection, I just want to preface that I'm curious. So, full disclosure, we have not had the privilege of working together yet. Okay. Are you the type of inspector that you help coordinate like the pest inspection and septic and water, whatever they want? Do you do that for your client customer?
Absolutely. So we pride ourselves in being a one-stop shop. So we do it all. So we do a lot of it in-house. We have our own radon testing equipment. We have our own air quality testing, water testing. We do well inspections, the home inspection. So we do subcontract out pest and septic because they are a separate license here in our state. But exactly, we bring it all together. And I always joke, like if there's an inspection in Western North Carolina, I will either do it or I'll find someone who will do it and I'll bundle it with our services. Pools, I mean, we do HVAC diagnostics if we have to. Like I said, it's really evolved over time. If someone's asked for it, I'll find it and I'll put it on our menu because you as agents or clients, you don't have time to be running around. You know, it all comes in one nice portal for you to access. So yeah, that's been a huge benefit to clients.
I love that. Okay, couple things on that because I'm loving this. Like you have no idea. Okay. First of all, I feel that the least expensive inspection, if you're on a budget, as some buyers are, is to do a pest inspection first. Do you agree or disagree? And it's okay if you don't. We'll still be friends.
Sure. I appreciate that. So I mean, first of all, my highest and utmost recommendations always get all the inspections every day.
Of course. Of course.
But you know what? Sometimes I actually would recommend a client on a budget not do the pest inspection initially. Most home inspectors will call indications of pest. Hey, there's evidence of termites. We can't tell if it's active. Our license doesn't allow that. But hey, maybe have a pest person come out. So those will always, sometimes I will do pest after the fact. Again, like I said, my ultimate recommendation is to get it done. But sometimes I'll actually, if they're on a tight budget, delay the pest. But once I'll have done right away, radon, like there's nothing we can see that's going to alert us to a radon problem. You know, sometimes like for a well inspection, if the water pressure is poor, we can kind of put them in the direction, or if the water is discolored or it smells, I can ask you to get a water test. But really the home inspection and the radon, we would have no visual substitute for actually performing those.
No, I love it. And the reason why I brought that up is because one time in the many years I've been doing this, I had a buyer client that there was something revealed in the pest inspection at the same time we were having the home inspection. And if we would have had the pest first, she wouldn't have continued with the expense of the home inspection. So it's, everybody, that's why they make different flavors of ice cream. I do fully believe that you should get every inspection under the sun. I really do, because you are doing your due diligence. And these are expensive. I mean, radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer, folks.
And I always tell people, because some people are like, I don't know. If you have pets, it affects your pets more because your pets live their whole life on the ground. But yeah, and another thing you were saying about revealing the facts, that's interesting. That's actually a good point. I mean, it wouldn't hurt if you really are budget conscious to kind of stagger those, because I agree, pest is much more affordable. But that's another one I see when we do septic, because people say, do I need to pump it? And our septic inspector is very comfortable inspecting when it's not been pumped. We actually want to see how it's operating full. So that's another one I'll say, hey, once you know it's actually going through, then invest the money to pump the tank. But yeah, there's lots of fun cost saving tricks we can always coach clients through.
You just hit on one of my hot buttons, and that is because ever since I've been doing this, I've been accustomed to them coming and evacuating the waste. Okay. And so when I had my first guy show up with like this camera scope and basically say, yes, it's full of, we did our job. Now we want your seller to pump their own, what? And I'm like, wait a minute, how can you see the chamber walls to make sure there's no roots or trees and things? So, and I'm not calling you out, I'm just having a conversation of, I feel like if you're going to do an inspection, you do the whole inspection. You got paid for the whole inspection. But see, somebody with a camera and a scope maybe has a better answer than that. You just happen to bring that up, and it brought, a little rub for me, just because I'm like, wait a minute, you got paid whether it got pumped or not. How did you do a full report with the stuff in there? Anyway,
happy to talk about it. Well, I was gonna say, I know I could go on about this for eons, and I know more about septic than I ever thought I would. But here, so to the contrary, if it's not full, how would you know if it was leaking or if there was a crack, et cetera? We want the water, the level of solids tells us a lot about how a tank's operating. So actually you want to see that. You want to make sure it's retaining solids, or if it's overly full, that tells you something, so it can go both ways. So if someone does want to pump, we recommend this, that the inspector and the pump truck show up at the same time. They inspect it first full, then you evacuate it, and then you can look at it empty. But I think at full tells you a lot. So again, it's really just comes down to budget, right? The ultimate recommendation, do it all in one go. But to your point, if it terminates, you just paid $400 to evacuate someone else's septic tank when you could defer that, right? So I think I'm very confident that we can inspect without it being pumped, because like I said, I think it tells you more with the liquids in it than it doesn't. But again, we can look at it both ways.
I love it. Let's talk about a sensitive subject called effervescence in block. Okay. I know I'm riffing. You had no idea what I was bringing your way.
Well, I'll go all day. I don't care. I love it.
I love it. So would you explain what effervescence is and why it exists? And is it a concern?
Sure. So it's actually called efflorescence. But I like effervescence. I like, because I feel like that's a fun word. Efflorescence. So what it is, so let's just moisture in Western North Carolina is probably one of the biggest problems we have, right? Where it comes from. But efflorescence is what you're going to see on a basement block wall, or crawl space, I guess, too. Anything that's that cinder block, it's that white powdery substance. It's like a residue from moisture. There is no blanket statement. Matthew, turn on, come here. There's no blanket statement. So no, so I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It all depends on the factors and, the other conditions. Like, what's the moisture reading of the wall? If the wall moisture reading is within normal readings, then I'm not really concerned with efflorescence. But hey, if we've got puddling water, standing water, high moisture ratings, like, it's just one more indication we're going to kind of put together to figure out what's going on.
I love that. Thank you so very much, because sometimes we will walk into a home that has been dry locked, which is a product that you can use on the inside of the wall. And yet when you touch it, it flakes off. The the however you pronounced it correctly and I didn't, like it'll flake. And so is that it is that question of, is it because of the moisture content inside, or is there something more severe happening on the outside of the block? Is that fair? Or is
Yeah,
that going
so
a little overboard? Is that being paranoid?
maybe, I mean, and that's when you rely on your professional, right? Like they're going to look at all of the factors, is this dry lock paint new? Was it recently done? But like you said, if it's failing, that means that they didn't address the underlying issue, the underlying cause. So that's when, as a home inspector, we kind of want to look at all, we're going to check the gutter. So the gutter's clean, are the downspouts draining away? Is there a negative grade? So many different factors. But yeah, that's why you want to rely on an awesome professional to answer it for you.
I love you, because let me just share with you what you just said is golden. I say we as human beings tend to jump to sometimes the most expensive fix to a problem when we could have just looked at gutters and downspouts
Mhm.
and negative slope or grading toward the foundation of the home or away from the home. I recently went to a home that had an encapsulated crawl space, but there were downspouts not connected to the black pipes. And I'm thinking, you just probably invested $8,000 on an encapsulated crawl space and never addressed why you're even getting water in your crawl space. So be careful of who you hire, folks. Make sure you work with a trusted professional, because I was dumbfounded when I saw that. Um, and people don't know that at least in Western North Carolina, I can't speak for any other state, some homes are actually built on like a riverbed, right? Like a aquifer or something. Like, can you share that a
Oh,
little
I
bit,
have
or what have you
two,
run into?
I was gonna say I have two crazy examples of that. But before I say that, yes, like you said, so if I see water down there and if we have gutter issues, I'm like, let's check that box first. Let's deal with the gutters. Cool. Then we're going to keep an eye on it and see what happens. If it didn't solve it, then let's go down the line. Like you said, don't just encapsulate and don't get to the root of the problem. So I love that. Yes. So like I said, moisture in Western North Carolina is everywhere, including underground springs. It's funny. So my husband and I have had some investment properties, and I bought a house that was built on an active spring. We bought it in winter, and the ground was fairly wet, and I was like, this is like a suspicious amount of water. But we got the property for a good enough price that it didn't really matter if we kept the structure. But yeah, we had to demolish the structure. We had to excavate underneath the house, put an underground detention system, which is essentially like sloped gravel, or they can be pipe systems, but essentially gravel. So when the water rose, it hit that gravel layer and then was routed to the storm drain. Fairly extreme. Or I saw a property recently that was listed that they just allowed the spring to remain active and like run through the basement.
Are you kidding me?
It's nuts. It's nuts. So, so not to scare anybody, because that's two. I've only seen this twice in 3,000 inspections, right? So I've seen it twice, but it is present. But again, just get your home inspection, rely on your professionals. Because I tell everybody, everything's negotiable, everything's fixable. The land is worth something, right? So nothing should be, especially in due diligence, like there's no reason to panic. You can always terminate the contract. Let's talk about it. Let's negotiate. Let's get some repairs. But yeah, those
Yeah.
are some pretty crazy examples.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That is crazy. So I'm curious, how long do you like to set the radon monitoring unit in a home? Because I've read on epa.gov/radon that they would actually like it to remain in the property for longer than the period of time, but our real estate transactions need to happen in a specific point in time. So my curiosity is it, are yours 24, 48, 72? What do you think is an appropriate amount of time to test for radon? Because consumers, if you go to epa.gov/radon, they will tell you that radon levels fluctuate based on air conditions, air quality, whether or not it's raining or if it's snowing. And in our area, anything above or right at 4.0, I think it's called picocuries per liter of air, unless I just
It's pretty
butchered
good.
that. Okay, I got that, but I can't say effervescence or effervescence. So,
Fluorescence.
yeah. So if it's 4 or above, it is recommended per EPA.gov that you address this. And I totally lost my train of thought. God bless. I'm so sorry. Can you pick it back up
No, so
on that?
you were asking about the length of the test. So let's talk about radon. Because not everyone knows about radon. Actually, one of my favorite visuals is EPA.gov. Look at the map of the United States and look at the radon map. So it's telling you areas that are more prone to radon. So here in Asheville, we are EPA level 1, which is means you're basically on average likely to have above average radon readings. So very important here in Asheville. And a lot of times when I coach clients, we get a lot of people who move here from the South, from Florida. It's not a problem to them. So they're very unaware of what radon is. So first of all, let's educate people on what radon is. It's a real thing. It's dangerous. But also I tell people radon is 100% treatable. The radon mitigation system is 100% effective. So again, nothing to be afraid of, just need to be aware. So the EPA minimum test is 48 hours. We also offer a 72-hour test, but we usually don't recommend that unless something came back concerning. So because like you said, things can fluctuate, but that 48 hours does give us a pretty fair understanding of how the house is performing. And then if we can recommend a system or not, if it's that 4.0 or higher. But yeah, fairly reliable. A reason, I think our radon tests are about $150.
That's
Pretty
reasonable.
easy to guarantee that you're not going to get cancer. Well,
Yeah.
not guarantee, but
And I want to talk more about that because you typically put it on the lowest heated square footage. So if somebody wants to finish a basement, you're not necessarily putting it down in the unfinished space, right? You're typically putting it on the heated square footage.
yeah, because you want to like simulate closed building conditions. So if it's an unfinished space, there's no finished ceiling, it's going to be more well ventilated. So we would just recommend, hey, when you finish the basement, have a test performed. You can perform a test in an unfinished basement just to kind of give you some frame of reference. But once it's finished, I would always recommend for you to retest because you're essentially trapping the radon, or you potentially can be. And another thing for homeowners that are concerned, if you have a mitigation system or you're just concerned in general, on Amazon, you can buy continuous monitors. So they basically look at the carbon monoxide monitors.
Mm-hmm.
They're they're a couple $100 maybe, and you can plug them in. So if you want like the ultimate peace of mind, just get a continuous radon monitor that's always taking readings so that you can kind of stay on top of it.
That's fantastic advice. And can you please express to consumers that you can tell when they open up windows and doors and do things like they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, we try and get ahead of that. We always leave a little leave behind card that says, please, like we have to simulate closed building conditions. So don't open the windows, don't open the doors. And yes, the monitor will tell us, we can see temperature fluctuations, humidity fluctuations. And if you physically move the machine, even if you put it back, we will know. So don't tamper with the radon test. Yeah.
I love that. No, I've sadly that has come up in my career and we've had to address it. And quite frankly, just so you know, Mr. Seller, you may be on the hook for buying a new inspection because you tampered with the one you shouldn't have. So ideally, closed conditions. I'm really glad that you brought that back up because again, typically when we're living in a home, we are opening a door to go to our vehicle or bring in groceries or things like that. So when you're talking about an airtight, and I do want to preface this, I personally, this is my opinion, no one's backed this, feel that we as human beings do everything we can to make our homes airtight because we don't want to lose our heat and our air to the outside elements. And so if you do get radon, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a defect with the property. It just means the home has been well insulated, well built, and there's nowhere for those radon gases to escape. Unless, of course, you're leaving windows and doors open and things like that. So a couple things I just said there was, an airtight home. Sometimes we don't, like right now, we just opened our French door to let our dogs out because they're going to make noise here in a minute if I didn't, so, but if I had a radon test in my house, that would, give it a red flag, like, hey, Mary opened the door for a couple hours and she shouldn't have. So just be cautious and careful. And do you agree with the statement that I made as far as like, we tend to build things airtight because we don't want to lose our heat and cool. But then again, that means nothing can escape.
Yeah, so to clarify, like it doesn't have to be precisely closed conditions, right? Normal use is kind of what we're aiming for. But exactly, like if it's summer and you're that person who likes to have all your windows and doors open, that's lovely. But in that scenario, we'd ask that you just open the door for coming and going and letting your dog out, etc. So it doesn't have to be perfectly closed conditions. And really, I mean, there's no perfectly airtight property. You actually don't want that because you want ventilation, you want circulation, you don't want anything to fester. Oh, now I've lost my train of thought.
I love it.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
What
you
was I
want,
gonna say?
okay. So my big thing is whether or not vents should be open in the crawl space. So a lot of homes in Western North Carolina are on crawl spaces or they're on slab. Those are your
Yeah.
pretty much your two choices, right? And they're either poured concrete walls or they're blocked. And they typically have foundation vents, and some of them are automatic, like meaning that they open and close, and some of them you have to manually open and close. And I think I don't know that this is our conversation or if we should bring in a pest operator for this, but I think there's a huge, should they remain open and let airflow or should they be closed, kind of a deal. Do you want to give any opinion on that? I mean, because that's kind of like, I think the airflow needs to be up underneath, but inside the home, ideally, I mean, why else are we, paying for airtight windows and the Tyvek wrap around
Yeah.
before we put on the exterior,
Sure.
things like that. So that's just some thoughts. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So like I just say this. So it's fairly airtight, but not 100%, especially like attics and whatnot. You want ventilation up there. But crawl space, yes. So again, crawl space are probably one of the ugliest things we see because people just don't maintain them well. And yeah, people will do things like insulate their crawl space vents. Hey, the vent was put there for a reason. They have an operation. So I always tell people when we go into crawl spaces and we see fungal growth, so we see indications of potential mold, I tell them, open your crawl space vents, make sure you're getting circulation, make sure the insulation is installed properly, get your vapor barrier down and make sure it's still intact. So those are really easy maintenance things to do to ensure the proper maintenance of your crawl space. So
love it.
yeah.
Love it. You did awesome. You did fabulous. Okay. Here is what I see on home inspections, and I can't wait. This is either going to shock you or not shock you. Okay? So the most common things I see on a home inspection are definitely gutters and downspouts are not corrected properly. For whatever reason, there's a roofing company that will either install roofing shingles on top of other roofing shingles instead of removing the layers, or they cut the shingles too short. Do you see things like that? Okay. Another thing that I see is double tap wiring in an electrical panel box. Why do they do that? And what? So can you tell the consumer what double tap wiring is in an electrical panel?
Yeah, well, a couple things. We can go back to roofs, like exactly like you said, roofs, maintenance, stuff like that, gutters. But I also want to put a plug that gutter, a lot of people get the gutter leaf guards. Those aren't great either. Just clean your gutters, maintain your gutters. And like shingles, you can actually, I think technically you can have up to 3 layers of shingles. But again, you just want to look at the whole assembly, make sure it's done by professionals, make sure it's operating correctly, etc. So double tapped wires, that means they basically have 2 wires running to the same breaker. You want everything to have its own dedicated circuit, own breaker. We see it a lot. They ran out of space. They added stuff, it wasn't done properly. But a lot of times, sometimes there's mismatch breakers, double tap breakers.
Yeah.
Again, have someone inspect it. And there we're probably going to advise an electrician come in just to kind of look. In Western North Carolina, we also have older homes. We see a lot of ungrounded outlets. I see that one a lot. Again, like I said, nothing's a deal breaker as long as it's not unsafe or, has evidence of damage. It's like, let's talk about it. Let's just understand what you're inheriting.
But there are some electrical panels that have been deemed a fire hazard, correct?
Yes. So I think it's the Zinsco panels and the Federal Pacific. We also we posted a video this morning on our social media talking about knob and tube wiring.
Yep.
That's a very outdated system we still see. So we still see it active. Sometimes we see it's been decommissioned, but not appropriately like removed or abated. So so those 2 panels would be noted as an active concern. But yeah, there are some other electrical things, I rely on your inspector to say, we have 3 categories: maintenance, which is blue. So that's maybe like, hey, your outlet cover is missing or your outlet cover is not secure. Then there's middle of the road yellow. It's like, hey, like a double tap breaker. Like, is something going to happen right this instant? No, but hey, let's take care of this sometime in the near future. And then there are red items. So like the panels that have the concerns or exposed wiring, frayed wiring, something that's going to be more of an immediate concern. We're always going to call out. So wide range, and definitely rely on your inspector to kind of guide you in that
I
conversation.
love that. Thank you for that. I do see powdery substance in crawl spaces. I do see that on occasion, and that's usually whether it's moisture related. And I will tell you what's interesting about that is from the remediation standpoint, we have some people that will go to the extreme of removing all the insulation, spraying an antifungal, letting it air dry, and then putting new fresh insulation. And then that's it. But I'm not sure that that actually addresses why it was there in the first place.
I was gonna say, like, that first things first. Anytime we see any sort of damage, it's like gotta solve the problem first.
Mhm.
So yeah, in that case, I always go for the low hanging fruit first. Let's restore the crawl space vents. Let's make sure it's adequately ventilated. If it's a basement or whatnot, let's put a dehumidifier down there. If you can go use the easy fixes first and kind of chip away at it before you go to the extreme of removing all the materials or doing the encapsulation, like, let's go one by one and try and identify the issue first.
Oh, I love you already because sadly, I have hired professionals that have scared the living you know what out of my client. And granted, now look, I am not an advocate for buying a home you don't feel 100% confident that you should move forward. I am not that person. My tagline in my business is you should never settle when it comes to your real estate needs. The reality is like you said previously, there is a way to fix things. It just depends on whether or not it's going to be, let's check, like you said, the gutters and downspouts before we immediately invest in an encapsulated crawl space, which we may or may not need. So, it's the difference, quite frankly, just of let's do a couple little things first. Let's see how that goes and let's observe it and move on. So
Right.
I love, love, love that. So I went over so I see reverse or negative slope, I guess is what they call it. That's where the foundation is here, but somehow there's a negative slope toward the foundation of the home, and that allows for water to penetrate the foundation of the home, and that's not good. And as I said, I've seen double tap wiring in the crawl space. Another thing we see is clouded windows. Okay. And
Doing
that
a lot.
one's a fun one for me because what makes a window cloud in the first place?
The seal is broken. I mean, if you look between the panes of the windows, you'll see kind of rubber seals. So either they've deteriorated over time, UV damage, any type of interruption in the seal is going to have that clouded window.
Mhm.
But again, yeah, like, you don't need to replace the whole window. They have, depending on the level of the seal and the assembly of the window, you can repair the seal, you can just replace the glass. But yeah, it's a fairly common one. And as agents, I always tell clients, especially seller clients, like, probably address little things like that, because when someone's walking through a home as a prospective buyer, those things eat away at their psyche, right? Like, when you see a clouded window, you may not acknowledge that, but like your brain saying like, oh, this doesn't seem as well maintained as they said it was,
A
but it may
thousand
have
percent.
been. But hey, do the windowsills, replace all your light bulbs, tighten up all your electrical outlets, like, do the little things to present your best in the house in the best light you can.
Absolutely. I love that. What do you do when dad shows up at the home inspection?
Say welcome. Thanks for joining us. Again, we highly recommend that you don't show up till 2 hours after the inspection. But again, we'll talk to anybody. We'll talk to seller, buyers, whoever has the right to be there. Yeah, it's no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are at 12:42 and I want to respect your time, but I could just tear into this even more. Like, this is the meat of what I've wanted to speak with a qualified contractor, and you are just super awesome, mega amazing. So I did pull up your website. I do hope that this comes through on the Zoom, folks. This is American Eagle Home Inspection.com. You can go there and order your home inspection. Now, this is a sensitive one for you. If I find out that I have a client that is currently battling fibromyalgia, asthma, or anything of an air quality issue, you are not a mind reader and you need to know about those things. But is there additional testing or anything that can help a consumer with those health concerns?
Yeah, so we can do air sampling, which tests for a litany of things, but I think that's what we see most with people who are sensitive to allergens or contaminants. So I think it should be on there as air sampling.
Okay.
We used to call it mold testing, but it covers more than mold. So we kind of did away with that verbiage. But yes, you can add that. And that's also nice for people. Maybe the home was recently renovated or they're concerned about unforeseen things, or not unforeseen, but like, is there mold in the walls? Is there mold in the attic? Is there mold in the crawl space? So sometimes taking those air samples and seeing how the air is performing in the actual residence is really helpful to people who have health concerns. That we see that a lot.
No, I
Yeah,
love that. So I think everybody can see this. And if not, I deeply apologize. This is your team. Can you see this, by the way, on
I
your
can't
screen?
see it. Are you
Okay.
screen sharing?
Yeah, I am screen sharing. So
Oh.
I even welcome you to pull up your screen if you need to. I gave you screen share ability if it would help.
Yeah, I think I've got it
Let's
memorized.
see. Hold
And
on.
also, if I can, while we're on here, since we're on social
Yeah.
media, I would plug our social media. We
Yes.
put a lot of time and effort into all the posts we do. They're not only fun, entertaining, educational. So American Eagle Home Inspection,
Yeah.
that's our handle on both Facebook and Instagram. So that's a fun one too, to like constantly educate people and have them become more familiar with typical findings.
I love it. Thank you for doing that. I was going to pull it up and then I saw myself and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So, okay, that sounds great. So, yes, American Eagle Home Inspection.com. How much notice do you need these days for an inspection? Because it's not like I can call you and you're going to instantly be there. So,
Yeah, great question. I mean, it is a very busy season. So right now we're about 4 to 5 days out. I don't love that. We try and accommodate 24 hours, 48 hours if possible. But yes, agents especially be aware of that, especially the tier vendors like septic. There's not a lot of septic inspectors around. So be really careful when you're writing those 10-day due diligences that your inspectors can accommodate. But yeah, we're about 4 or 5 days out, and we usually try and get everything done at the same time. But I always encourage agents, like if you have a special, situation, always give us a call and we'll try and make it happen for you.
I love that. Absolute agents. Did you hear what she just said? You need before you start putting your due diligence date, make
Right,
sure.
7 days.
Yeah. Make sure you can get the water test results back and that you can get the radon test results back. Make sure that you do that for your client, because in North Carolina, once you put a due diligence date, you can ask for an extension, like if an inspection or an appraisal hasn't come in, but the seller's not obligated to play nice and give you an extension. I mean, you hope that they would, because you'd hope in good faith that everybody's doing their best. But why
Sure.
even put yourself in that situation to begin with?
Yeah. Agreed.
So that is so awesome. Now, I will say this. Sometimes I see an inspector, and this drives me absolutely nuts. And I've talked to the inspector about it. And I don't want to say their name or anything, but let's say this is a piece of wood and this wood is damaged.
Okay.
For visual purposes, they will stick their pin inside the damage.
Sure.
Why? Like, why? Like,
I actually kind of like that part, like that we are legally able to probe, because sometimes sellers will paint the wood, right, to try and conceal that. So
okay.
sometimes the only way to expose that is to punch it through. It's like I said, paint is most common. Like people will paint deck posts. Looks lovely. You can also put wood filler in it and it kind of masks that damage. But if your pen or your knife, or my husband carries a golf club with the head off of it, and cracks me up every time. But yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, probing sometimes is the only way to kind of expose the extent of the damage. Or sometimes wood looks damaged and you poke at it and it's solid.
Okay.
So really, probing is actually a fairly necessary part of our job.
What? I don't know why it's a trigger for me, because I'm just like, oh my God, why did you just do that?
Well, sometimes it is like abundantly obvious. Like, okay, you probably didn't need to poke that one, but
okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. And I will say this, because I know we're getting to that timeline.
Sure. You're
the
fine.
other thing that I see about, let's talk about decks. Okay. This one drives me nuts, because I understand. And what I mean by drives me nuts is somehow a deck is built and my unqualified contractor skills say that it's supposed to have a piece of flashing, it's supposed to have the deck board, and it's supposed to have this really long bolt that secures the deck to the foundation of the home, unless it's built freestanding, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times what will come up in an inspection is there was no evidence of flashing. Once that deck is there, there's real no way of finding the flashing, is there? I'm
Yeah,
curious.
that's really hard. That's definitely that's a valid ambiguity. Because like you said, if it there are ways to build it where it's concealed where we don't see it. I mean, in general, we can usually find it, but yeah, sometimes I've seen inspection reports that said like, hey, don't know if there's evidence or not, you know. In that case, I would encourage the buyer to look at the entire assembly. If we can't see the flashing, but the deck bolts, the lag bolts, the lateral bracing, the joist hangers are there. If everything else is done to a T, that gives me some confidence that that flashing is there. But if everything else is fairly lacking, then I say, hey, I might say, let's do some destructive demolition to see what we can see. And then also, if the flashing isn't there, you're generally going to have water damage or some evidence of damage as a result of that. So again, you kind of have to look at the amalgamation of all these things. But yeah,
Oh, I
that's
love
what's
that.
hard with clients in general is like the things you can't see. Right. And we do all we can. We have thermal imaging cameras, we have drones, we have moisture meters, we try and do all we sewer scopes, sewer cameras, all that stuff. But yes, at the end of the day, there is some inherent unforeseen conditions that we can never get to, but we'll
I
do the best we
love that.
can.
So I love that. And again, trying to be condensed, deck posts themselves, once they're over so many feet, they're supposed to have this Y bracing thing. Is that accurate, or am I just making that up?
Yes, that's the lateral bracing. Yeah, it's
Lateral.
fairly typical. Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, you'll see those, yeah, the two
Yeah.
kind of Y looking posts, but yeah,
Sometimes I
that's
don't see that on, but isn't it after so many feet you have to have it? Like, is it 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, or it's just consider whatever the building code requirement is?
yeah. So we're not code inspectors, so we wouldn't quote to code, but we're basically looking for like the perception of safety, right? You know, if we're looking at the overall assembly of the deck and and yeah, exactly, it's perceived to be at a certain height or just depending on the assembly needing lateral bracing, we'll generally call it out. And sometimes it's a suggestion, and sometimes it's more so of a stronger recommendation. Just kind of depends on all the factors of the terrain and steep slopes and stuff like that too.
Yeah, got it. Okay, great. All right, I think I'm going to boil this down to like two more questions. I'm going to do my best. This is more of like a statement,
Okay.
and so Kimmy, I'm buying a new home. The builder's
Sure.
going to give me a 1 year warranty. Why should
Great.
I have a home inspection?
Great. Well, first of all, you should always have a home inspection, especially on new construction. And I always tell people, yes, you have a 1 year warranty. You will never have your builder's attention more than before you make that final payment. They want that final draw. So you want their attention to make sure they deal with punch list items. I'm a general contractor. We're not perfect. Things happen. But also I hear a lot, oh, it was inspected by the city inspector. It was inspected to code. Why? So we're good. So we as residential home inspectors inspect differently than city code inspectors. For example, we did one a couple weeks back, the shower, really fancy shower, no shower doors, kind of this big open thing. Lovely. I'm sure it was built to code, but we as home inspectors stress a property, right? We want to put undue stress on it to simulate normal living conditions. We ran the shower for, I don't know, probably 15 minutes, and that water started to trickle in the direction it wasn't supposed to go. Again, I'm sure it was built to code, but those are things we were able to kind of identify in what we're looking for. So yeah, I always tell people, just because it had that inspection, city code inspection doesn't mean it's to the standards that we're looking for. And then I always tell people with new construction, get an 11-month inspection. So meaning just before that warranty is up, have us come through again and make sure we catch anything so that you can take advantage of that full year warranty. So yeah, so new construction's actually got double the inspections. And we also do pre-drywall inspections. So if you're having it built before they put that drywall up, if you do want to see what's in the walls, the insulation, the wiring, the plumbing, we can take care of that as well.
I
So
love that. And you actually answered my other question was how many times do you hear of like, well, at the time the house was built, that requirement wasn't required. Do you ever come in contact with that? And how do you address that? I mean, so are you inspecting based on current code or like are you factoring the age of the home? And I'm Gary, what's your answer?
so we don't inspect any code. Here's what we're looking for: current safety and current defects and safety concerns. So I don't care what the code was, what the code is. We're going to call it out as a concern. So yes, if something grandfathered in and we're aware of that, we'll sometimes mention that, like, hey, your door swings out over the stairs, or your stairs are too narrow, or the headspace above your basement stairs is too low. Just an FYI, per current standards, that's not advised, but it may have been advised in the past. I'm presenting you with this information, do with it what you will. Or like on retaining walls. There's often we'll see retaining walls that could be a fall hazard, right? It's kind of on the side of the driveway, someone could walk over it. That's not technically a code requirement to have a handrail there, but we may say, hey, just an FYI, this could be a fall concern. It's not technically a code requirement, but we're just throwing it out there. So that's a good example of like how we kind of go above and beyond. Again, just pointing out and highlighting safety and defect concerns. Do with that information what you will.
I love this. I have enjoyed this so much.
Thank you so much. I could talk about this all day.
I know, me too. I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to do like a lunch and learn or something with consumers, because I don't think consumers completely understand. You are their advocate. You're not in somebody's pocket except theirs. Your fiduciary duty is to theirs, just like the agent that recommended you. And furthermore, we really do want to play nice in the sandbox. We all want everybody to get what they want. You fell in love with the house, or else you wouldn't have made an offer. Now we're just trying to protect you and make sure you're not inheriting deferred maintenance that could potentially be addressed by the seller before you purchase the home, or at least renegotiate the purchase price based on the findings. So there are ways, like, to your point, if the seller doesn't have money to make all the repairs, a solution can very well be some kind of concession or whatnot. Of course, you always have to check with your lender, because there are certain concessions which are allowed if there's lending involved versus a cash buyer. But there's a solution to be made when you work together, and we're not against or adverse to each other. We just truly want to make sure, number one, we're doing everything we can so that you feel comfortable moving forward. And then if you don't, speak up. Don't ever buy a home because you feel pressure or obligated, or there's ways to sadly get out of a contract. Like, I say sadly, I think it's a good thing that even though once you go under contract, there's this promise that you're working toward closing. But if at any point in time that doesn't feel like a good fit for, the buyer, due to something was revealed that wasn't disclosed because we didn't know, and then you should be able to exercise your right to terminate and move on. It's much less expensive to terminate than purchase the property only to find out you really did inherit some huge ticket items. So I appreciate, I'm so grateful for your time. And a shameless plug, if you're at, so today is April 25th, 2024. That's the date of this recording. Is there anything you wish I would have said or that we would have discussed? Now you have the floor.
Well, I tell people often these conversations might actually be perceived as overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, how will I ever know this amount of information? Like, that's overwhelming. Here's what you need to know. Hire trusted professionals. Hire someone like Mary. You've clearly demonstrated your expertise and knowledge that you've gained over many years. I hope I've done the same. So you don't need to know all this. Don't worry about that. Sure, you can educate yourself, but at the end of the day, rely on trusted professionals to guide you through the process. And that's all you need to know.
I'm so glad you said that, because I am so, Hollywood, if you're listening, I am so sick of you portraying every real estate professional as an idiot who makes way too much money. You have no idea what we have to know. We are unlicensed therapists. We're unlicensed. Really and truthfully, when I go to a property, I bring a high-powered flashlight. I don't have it with me. I bring a flashlight. And I shine it just to see, is there any evidence of roof leaks before we make an offer? And then I just say, listen, this is something you want to talk to your home inspector about if you choose to place an offer on a property. Because if I can be the gatekeeper before we start spending money, that is one of my fiduciary responsibilities. So just don't think that we're pretty and we just, type up contracts and there's nothing else. I got news for you. Yeah. And we feel the stress of when things start going sideways, because it does. I will tell you, consumers, again, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. I've said this over and over again. Sellers, you have a duty to disclose the condition of your home. Yes, you have the right to elect no representation, but that's typically for those that have never physically lived on the property. And you do have the right to say no representation if you don't know, because you don't want to implicate yourself in saying there's no problem and there actually is. You do have that right. However, there is a movement that if you falsely represent on the disclosure or should have known something, the buyer can come back and say, you know what, you did not represent properly the condition of this home. I want my money back, not just the money I just spent on my inspections, but I want my due diligence money back too. And
Yeah.
that's not a fun conversation to have at all with any party whatsoever. So let's avoid that by doing pre-home inspections, home inspections. Contact American Eagle Home Inspection. They are your trusted advisors, along with all of the people they partner with to protect you. I am right at that hour mark. Thank you so very much. And for any real estate, yes, it's my pleasure. Any professional that's going to be in the Hendersonville, North Carolina area, if you haven't registered for tomorrow, is there time to register? Or are they out of luck? Okay,
we're
awesome.
so good.
We're going professionals are going to get together. We're going to have all kinds of juicy conversations. So you do not want to miss it. Okay.
Wait.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much. Have a great
I'll
day.
see you tomorrow.
Yes. Look forward to it. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.